Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Social Work Bubble podcast. I'm your host, Laura. I'm a licensed master social worker here in New York, and today we welcome special guest, Diana Beltran of Happy Autumn Counseling, who will be talking all about her own social work journey, including her experience as a clinical director. Thank you so much, Diana, for coming on today.
Yeah, I'm super excited to be here. I always love being able to talk about, social work.
Woohoo! Now, for those listening, before we get started, don't forget to like, share, and follow the podcast on whatever platform you're listening on, and we'll dive in. So, Diana, thank you again for coming on. As we get started, can you introduce yourself to the listeners, including your background and what you're currently doing?
Yeah, of course. So again, hello, my name is Diana, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker in the state of Texas and in Arkansas. I am the clinical director over at Therapy Works Counseling, which is a bilingual group practice in Texas in the Dallas Metroplex area. I'm very excited to be here to talk about what it's like being a clinical director.
Exciting. Okay. That's great. I didn't know you were from the South. How fun.
Yeah. I kind of feel like I made my way down from Chicago. So I was born in Chicago in Park Ridge, Illinois. Then my dad got a job in Arkansas. So we moved to Arkansas. And then about 3 years ago, we moved to Dallas. So we're getting closer and closer.
There we go. Now, what initially led you to social work?
Yeah. So, funny story is that I never actually thought about social work until about my junior year in college.
Mm-hmm.
I originally wanted to be a doctor. I think everybody aspires to be a doctor, and then they start taking classes and realize how hard it is. The science classes were really hard, but I still enjoyed it. And then about junior year, my best friend, she was doing social work. She's a year ahead of me, and she was, kind of telling me about the work that she was doing and how she helps people and works with the Hispanic Latino population in Little Rock. And so I started looking more into it. And so I switched my major junior year to psychology and minored in social work. And then I looked into getting my master's, and that's kind of how I started getting into social work.
Amazing. It's so funny because I feel like that's similar for so many social workers, is like, including myself. I started off in nursing because I didn't even know social work was a thing until I was like well into college, and I'm like, I hate nursing. This cannot be for me.
Right. And social work, at least for me, I didn't know that social workers could do counseling. So I think I had this idea, and I think everybody has like a stereotypical idea of what social workers do. We see it in the movies. They're portrayed as, these civil servants, and they come in, take your kids, and then they just get this bad rap. But actually, when I did more research at that time, I realized that social workers do so much, and they do in various settings and different types of things. And it's so, just diverse. And I love that about social work. So that's why I kind of decided to go into that.
Absolutely. That's what's so great about it, is there are so many options. Where I think for me, I remember in middle school doing a career survey thing to try to figure out what you wanted to do. And I just loved everything so much. It was really hard for me to pinpoint what I wanted to do. So being able to choose a field where you can kind of switch it up and keep it interesting if you need to is really great.
Yeah, exactly. I know myself very well that after a while I get very bored with the things that I'm doing. And so I like the ability to be able to just kind of jump into different areas or different settings and continue to still do social work. And I think that that's cool. And so I've worked in various settings. I worked at the psych hospital in Arkansas. I worked in PHP-IOP here. I've worked in nonprofits, and now I'm in private practice, which is just a different area of social work and therapy altogether.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Now, being a clinical director, you don't just get there overnight. Can you kind of describe your journey to become a clinical director?
Yeah. So, I worked in Arkansas as a nonprofit, for 2 years. I wore two hats. When I say I wear two hats, I was an outpatient providing services, but there were times where our residential services needed a Spanish speaking clinician. And so sometimes I would go over there and provide services in the residential. So I like to say that I had two hats in that job. And then when I moved to Texas, I started getting more experience, especially in nonprofit, at the Family Place, which is a, domestic violence shelter in Dallas. And so, I started kind of working my way in, developing kind of more of a Hispanic program with the Family Place, trying to make it unique, making it very specific for the Latino Hispanic population, because the Hispanic population has just very different needs. And so I was trying to get that program going. I was talking to, my manager and the CFO and trying to get like something going, and kind of working my way in there, being a more prominent face, like kind of giving like interviews with Telemundo, or like talking with the board members and kind of working closely with them. And then eventually I left that to go into private practice. I just wanted the more of the flexibility. And I think with a lot of that experience kind of led me to my boss at that time at the private practice, my private practice, and the boss, she was like, hey, like, I see that, you're doing all these things. I think that you can do so much more. Are you interested in a clinical director position? And I was just like, yes, like what a cool way to kind of, in a way, give back in a sense of like, creating programs and, helping future interns and future clinicians, become fully licensed, and just kind of guide them in that sense. And also just continue to make connections in the community, because like I tell my interns, the people in the community are the stakeholders, and they're the ones that are going to also make changes. And if we know who those stakeholders are and we can build relationships, we can make little changes in the community.
Absolutely. It sounds like there was a lot of awareness and just understanding on your part where there needed to be support, and kind of being like, oh, this is an area of need right here. Let's go for it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny because, I actually, this past week, these last 3 days, I just did, in Texas, we have to do, a training to be certified to be a supervisor, to be able to supervise LMSWs. And so I did that 3-day training. And the whole reason why I was like, I'm going to be a supervisor is because in Arkansas, we just didn't have bilingual clinicians. We just didn't have a bilingual, mentor in the community that can like provide, teach you how to say certain things in Spanish, or, guide you in this direction or in that direction. And I told myself, like, one day I'm going to be that person that's just going to be able to guide, future clinicians, help them either say things in Spanish, or, help them to be more culturally competent in serving the Hispanic population. And so I did the training. So I'm just looking forward to being applied for that S, so I can be an LCSW S. And I think like that's just kind of like you said, I saw the need, and there I am.
Absolutely. Which I think is just such a testament to the social work journey. Is like, it's so easy, I think, for people to just be like, okay, this is my plan. This is what I want to do. But so often it's just like going with the flow and kind of being like, oh, okay, this is what works. This is what feels good. This is where I can do the work.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what, like, I've noticed how much I love really building up the interns. I have 7 interns under me.
Oh, wow.
And so I know, and they're all bilingual, which I think is very cool, because we need more bilingual clinicians. We need more people of color clinicians. And it's just so important for me, at least, that they're having that one-on-one time with a clinician that understands the population that they're serving, right? And so they can ask me questions about, hey, like my client is telling me these things, and I'm like, oh, that's something cultural. Let's talk about that. And how we can, mold social work and kind of weave that in and be culturally competent and help these clients so that they can understand, mental health, and understand, themselves, and in a culturally competent way. And I wish that I had that back in Arkansas. I had my colleague, my best friend, she literally had her office next to me, and we both would bounce ideas, but it's not the same when you have a person above you that has experience. And so now I'm that person with experience.
That's so exciting. I mean, because that's game changing. I mean, even I remember in grad school, I didn't really get any kind of education or support from a supervisor about cultural competence or having those conversations until grad school. And I kind of had to be the one to initiate that. And I'm like, there's so many social workers that don't go on to grad school. Like, so what are they doing? They're just like floundering around with no real support in that area.
Yeah. And what I loved about my supervision training that I went through is that Carla, in San Antonio, she really dwelled in the importance of being culturally competent. And she's just phenomenal because she has worked she's comes from a military family and has like traveled all over the world and, has, made it a point to learn the language or try to communicate or learn the culture. And she has like worked here and there in all these settings. And I'm just like, wow, like, that's so important that we, want to learn the culture and have our clients teach us, but also we do the work to educate ourselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What is as a clinical director, then you have 7 interns under you as well. It's a lot going on. What does your typical kind of day look like?
Yeah, like just a second ago before I hopped on here, I woke up and checked all my emails, responded emails that like, tasks, making sure that I have my checklist for the day. And then I just start in with, either checking in with my clinicians, making sure like, hey, how are you guys doing? What's going on? How can I support you? And then just kind of going from there. And then on top of just doing that, I also, do my work, which is, I have a small caseload. I still see clients. And so I check in with them and set up their appointments, making sure that we're ready for the day. And then also making sure that I have all the documentation and paperwork for those clients. And then start looking to see in my area, like where can I make connections? Who can I partner with, and reaching out to those stakeholders, because where I work at is a bilingual group practice. And so we're growing, we're expanding, but we also want to, provide services for the Hispanic community, but also, partner with people that, don't know where to send their Hispanic clients to. And where we work at, everybody speaks Spanish, everybody's licensed. We accept insurance, and this is just like an amazing stop where, hey, like, where can I send a Hispanic client? I don't speak Spanish. Oh, therapy works. And so they like send us over. But I think it's still important, like I said, to kind of collaborate with like partners or people in the community so that they can send clients over to us and be able with culturally competent clinicians and that can speak the language and provide them service in their native emotional language. So that's kind of what my day looks like throughout the week.
It's a lot in a day.
A lot. Yeah. But it's fun. It's interesting. Now, every day is different.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's so valuable what the practice is doing too, because I remember when I was working in community mental health, I had a client come in who only spoke Russian, and no Russian speaking clinicians, none were available. I tried to do, and I was working in Brooklyn in New York City at the time. I'm like, there must be like a Russian therapist out there somewhere.
Yeah. And
we just could not find any. And so I had to use an app to translate for me in session. And I'm like, this is supposed to be a therapy session. Like, this is not working. And I mean, you really start to see the value of just having someone understand not just the language, but like the nuance of the language, because it's so different in a therapy session than just in day-to-day conversation.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I was speaking to one of my colleagues and she and I had a conversation about how, sometimes when we work with kids, things happen in their language. And so like, and I know that sounds odd to explain, but it's like if something happens, like a traumatic event happens and it happens in Spanish, they want to be able to talk about it in Spanish because that's what happened. And so having a clinician that can switch back and forth in, in English and Spanish and just be able to understand and capture that is amazing. And it's so important because that's the experience that happen. It's in their native emotional language. And I know for myself for a fact that sometimes I can express myself much better in Spanish than I can in English, or certain words or just get points across. And so I know my clients, I feel that, especially the ones that are bilingual.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I mean, this might be different because you're in kind of the private practice world now, but you've had experience in the nonprofit world. How do you balance kind of just like agency expectations or practice expectations with supporting clinicians and making sure everyone is good to go? Because I've seen a lot of people struggle with, okay, like administration is telling us like we have these productivity things that we have to get done, like all of that. So what does that look like for you?
I know whenever I worked at Centers for Youth and Families in Little Rock, we had that productivity of about trying to do 25 clients a week, which,
Mm-hmm.
sounds like a lot. And then, our calendars would look crazy because we were trying to book at least 40 people a week and with the expectation that, 30 people are going to show up.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be extremely challenging because, you're seeing 8 people a day, or sometimes you're seeing 6, 7 people a day. And finding that balance, I don't know how I did it. If I'm being honest, I don't know how I did it. But I think what helped is just having a really strong support system
Mm-hmm.
with my coworkers, like we were able to kind of lift each other up and say like, hey, like I can't take this client. Will you take this client? How can we, create a schedule where it's like we're not feeling overwhelmed, and also talking a lot to our manager at the time, our program director, and saying like, I'm feeling overwhelmed, this is just too much, and just finding
Mm-hmm.
that balance to see if they can find support. In an agency, I was never in a position of authority, but I always took my program director would, you're the lead clinician and da 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 da, and I would just be like, I'm like, everybody just do their work. Like, how
Mm-hmm.
can I support you? What can I do? Oh, like you don't have a client, just close your door, take a 15-minute cat nap. We just try to find some rest because it can be very overwhelming, especially when we are working with domestic violence.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That's a lot.
Yes, yes.
Oh, wow.
It's very demanding, but at the end, it's just so rewarding. It's so rewarding.
Absolutely. With the work that you do now as kind of that clinical director, what do you find is the most rewarding in that role?
What I found most rewarding recently is just kind of seeing my interns just grow as, baby clinicians. And I don't want to call them baby clinicians, but, they are, clinicians about to apply for their license and, start their, clinician journey. And it's just amazing to see like, I structure the internship in a way where I do a lot of hand holding in the first couple of months,
Mm-hmm.
and then slowly start kind of turning the reins onto them, where I'm like, well, what do you think about that? And
Mm-hmm.
just kind of ask them to tell me what they want to do versus me tell them what I think that they should do.
Right.
And that just allows for them to kind of, dig deeply into their skills. And then I love seeing how when they start with therapy works and then they kind of go, if they're with us for a year, I like seeing like the growth, the research
Mm-hmm.
that they have done, the trainings that they have engaged in, our talks during supervision are now more about like, I'm thinking about doing this versus what should I do?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I like too that. I mean, you do offer that support initially, because that when I was in grad school, it was very much like, all right, you're on your own. And I'm like, no one ever taught me how to be a therapist. What do I do? Like, this is
Right.
insane. Now I'm responsible for all these people and I have no idea what's going on. And so I think I would have appreciated, I mean, we figured it out, but I would have
Course.
appreciated a little bit more support in that area. So it's nice that there's also that like gradual shift where you're like, okay, you're out on your own now at this point.
Yeah, and sometimes I find it a little funny when they ever text me sometimes, like after they have left their internship, now they're licensed, and one of them once texted me and like, hey, is this okay for me to do? And I'm like, well, you know what? You're a licensed clinician. What do you think now? Like, like, you don't have to ask me anymore. What do you think? We're
Mhm.
colleagues. And they're like, you're right. And I'm like, yes, you can do it. You don't need my validation. I'm
Mhm.
here to support you, but you got this. Like, use your skills. You learned everything that you needed to learn. You were always going to be learning, but you got this.
Mhm.
I'm happy to help and support you in any way, but you got it.
That's so great. What have you really, I guess, like, what's influenced how you supervise? Like, what have you taken away just from over the years?
I think what I have taken away over supervision is, really listening to what the interns need at that
Mhm.
time. Sometimes I'm noticing that, they just need a lot of support. Some of them just need a lot of support. And I'm like, okay, they need a lot of support. And some of them don't need a lot of support and they are perfectly fine, taking the reins, taking initiative. And I love that, but I'm still I'm still there,
Mhm.
right? Like I'm still available and just paying attention to what they're needing. Because not everybody needs that much hand
Yeah.
holding. Yeah. And so, and again, like everybody's different too. Like some people learn differently, and just kind of also explaining their theories and explaining, activities that they can do with their clients in the way that they can understand, and also helping them get creative with some of those theories, because like, yeah, we can do CBT, but not every client is going to understand the CBT triangle, right? Like we
Mm-hmm.
maybe need to explain that a little bit differently, just so that, and make it fun or make it creative, or we need to show them a video, or maybe, we need to do X, Y, and Z. And so I try to kind of teach them like, yes, here's the theory and we can explain the theory, but how can we make this to be more unique to the client? How can we
Mm-hmm.
apply this so that they can understand it and really, really learn it so that they can apply it to their daily lives?
Mm, absolutely. That's so valuable because I've seen, I think, some supervisors where, for whatever reason, I mean, oftentimes it's because they're overworked or they have like so much going on where it can be hard to manage a lot of interns or other clinicians, where it's kind of just like, it's very strict on like, okay, like this is what you do, this is this, that I have that flexibility and openness and really tailor it, which is what we learned how to work with clients too. Like you want to individualize it.
Yeah. And right now that I have gone through the LCSWS supervision training,
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to figure out like, how am I going to create like a 2-year curriculum, and not necessarily
Mm-hmm.
like a curriculum,
Right.
but just kind of have something where every LMSW that now comes to me for supervision, how can I make the hour to be both, what's the word I'm looking for? Like that they can learn something, that they can take away from
Mm-hmm.
something, whether it's us reviewing like the ethics and going through the ethics and just like really talking about, what is ethical, what's not ethical. How can we make sure that we're applying this, daily in our practice. Also preparing to learn the ethics to apply it for our tests, for the
Mm-hmm.
LCSW test, and just really tailoring this, a curriculum, this plan, for the next 2 years, because yes, we can case conceptualize at every session,
Mm-hmm.
but LMSWs don't just need case conceptualization. They need to learn, how to properly diagnose, how to take good notes, how to, at times they might have to do training. They may need to do some public speaking. They need to, engage with people in the community. I hate talking on the phone. I would be so happy if I never had to talk to anybody on the phone, or
Mm-hmm.
sometimes even like text that many people every day. But, that is also a skill,
Yeah.
talking to people and make connections, and how to be, willing to partner with other community members. And I teach that to my interns. I'm like, social work is just not coming to do counseling, coming into an
Mm-hmm.
office, doing counseling, seeing your clients and doing paperwork. It's going out into the community. And I send them to a lot of events. And I'm like, this is your opportunity to talk to people, make
Mm-hmm.
connections, network, teach the people that are approaching your table, and talk to them about the services that we provide, but also like making a connection, not just telling them, but make the connection that they
Mm-hmm.
want to come and work with us and they want to come into services with us. And
Mm-hmm.
that's something that I think is real. That's a skill, and that's a skill to teach them. So yeah, I mean, it's a lot of things, and I don't know how I'm going to structure it yet. I'm still thinking about how to do that without it being like boring,
Mm-hmm.
but also just educational, and that they leave supervision being like, I feel way more prepared to take this test. I feel more prepared being in LCSW, being on my own, and I can continue to use the skills that I learned in LMSW supervision and move forward with my
Mm-hmm.
career.
Yeah, that's huge. I'm loving too just the community connection aspect because I feel like, because I work at a private practice and I feel in so many ways cut off from like community engagement and like active involvement unless I do it on my own time, where it's
Right.
just like, okay, like I think it's so easy to just get stuck on, all right, these are the clients I work with, and then I'm like clocked out for the week, where it's so important to really be like, okay, this is the community that I'm working within. Let's build those relationships. Let's get to know what's going on and what these different issues are coming up.
Yeah. My friend in Little Rock, we were only like a couple of handful of bilingual clinicians at that time. My friend Jessica, she and I were two bilingual clinicians in the whole state of Arkansas that could offer PCIT, which is parent-child interactive therapy, in
Wow.
Spanish. And I had to send like when I did PCIT, I had to send all my stuff to Oregon for a
Mhm.
clinician to review it so I could get certified in PCIT. And so bilingual services is so hard to come by.
Yeah.
And, only like 2, 3 people in Central Arkansas. At that time, we were like maybe a handful. And then there's just a massive population of Hispanic, Latino, Spanish speaking
Mhm.
that need services. Like we need at least somebody to go out into the community. So Jessica and I on our weekends, we would print out flyers and just go over to Southwest Little Rock and just, pass out flyers in all of the Hispanic Latino stores. We would just talk up to the owners and just hand out flyers and ask them, hey, if you need services, like the services are here. We would go to churches on Sundays and like, set up a table and just have people ask us questions. We actually did a Q&A once with the community. And it's just so important to not only just see two social workers, Spanish speaking social
Yeah.
workers, but also be able to have them be approachable, because
Mhm.
if you're not approachable, then they're not going to feel comfortable. And so we're young.
Mhm.
We're young. We were two young girls, like just going out and just talking to community, and they felt more comfortable to be able to say like, hey, what's going on with my kid? These are the issues. And so that was just a way for us to connect with the community. And Little Rock is small. I mean,
Mhm.
parents, my parents would go to church, and then the people that they were friends with would come up with like, I need my kid needs therapy. Can your daughter see my kid? And I'm like, Mom, just tell them, like, just hand them the number,
Mhm.
but like, say anything, just hand them the number and just, keep going. But that's how small our community was. And so,
Yeah.
and that's how like Central Arkansas at that time, and back into like 2018, 2019, that
Mhm.
there was only Jessica, the people only knew Jessica, and then they knew me.
Mhm. Oh my gosh. Wow. So definitely a big need there, just for
Absolutely.
bilingual therapists and other social workers too.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the main reason why I keep my license there, is just
Mhm.
knowing that there's still such a massive need of bilingual services. And
Mhm.
Arkansas is so rural that I remember I had one client that was traveling an hour away just for services.
Oh wow. That's rural.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. So do you still do work in Arkansas then?
Sometimes, so I do immigration evaluations, and sometimes we'll get occasional clients from Arkansas that are seeking services. So I do them
Okay.
telehealth. Or if there's students that are from Texas that go to
Mhm.
school in Arkansas, sometimes like I'll be able to see some of them from there too.
Okay, interesting. Now, I mean, you mentioned earlier just with working with interns, like applying different ethics to things. What have you noticed are some of the more common ethical dilemmas that you've come across in practice?
Hmm. Oh man, now you put me on the spot.
Sorry.
I'm trying to think if I can think of anything. Um, hmm. I think the one that's coming to my mind is documentation.
Oh yeah.
It's just coming to mind is documentation. I'm a big stickler with documentation. I've always been somebody who's just very on time, and I don't know if I like that about myself or not like about myself, but I just really think it's so important to have good documentation in notes and just in general,
Hmm.
especially when you're working with Hispanic clients. I think that there's just so much that's going on, and we want to make sure that we're, documenting things that are, because we've had clients that are, coming from the border, and we want to make sure we
Hmm.
have good documentation to support, their mental health, that, if they're petitioning for visas or asylums, and we make sure that, our sessions are capturing what they're needing. And
Hmm.
so I think having really good documentation, and I've come across with some of my clinicians that, they don't keep good documentation, or they forget to write notes. And so I'm always on them. I'm like, hey, documentation is so important. We need to make sure that we have paper trails, that we are, putting our
Hmm.
notes in. Because if one day our clients need these documents for whatever reason, like I don't want us to look bad. And
Hmm.
we need those notes to support our clients. I think that's the one that I always come across as like just documentation.
Yeah, that's huge. And I mean, kind of in that same realm that you're talking about, like always being mindful of how you're documenting, like what exactly you're saying, because people can access our records if they need to for whatever reason. And it can very easily paint a client in a negative or positive light. And it's important that we're really mindful of, okay, what is the impact of this if for some reason this is to be used for some reason?
Absolutely. And then I guess like the next thing is just the way, how do we make sure that we are being culturally competent in the sense that, I'm Mexican American. I was born here. My parents are from Mexico, but not every client that we're going to see is from Mexico, right? And we need to be kind of very aware that our clients are not all going to be Mexican, that, we have clients from Colombia, we have clients from El Salvador, we have clients from Honduras, I had Argentinian clients, and just making sure that we are approaching each client, with cultural competence and understanding like, hey, like just because they speak Spanish does not classify them all into one, person. That there's different layers there. Salvadorians have different, issues that are going on in their country. They have, different needs. But people from Venezuela have different issues that are going on in their country and different needs, different ways to say things, different, the way that they approach relationships and the way they approach, their marriages, their children. And and for me, at least, like I want to, yes, we are all Latinos, but they're different.
Right.
And being competent and knowing that as well, and asking questions, and at being curious and being genuine when we're being curious, right? Because we don't also want to just ask a bunch of questions and just look like we're being nosy, or just like just approaching it with competence, and also doing our own research as well. So I think that's also another big thing, because like a lot of people just want to categorize everybody as Mexican, but no, there's just different types of Latinos, and we need to approach them all differently. And then also within each country, there different cultures within the country as well. And so that's also something that I like think I think I could say a kind of ish ethical dilemma in a way.
Yeah. Absolutely. Because that can, very quickly lead to assumptions, and if we're not mindful of the nuance that's there.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, and it's fun out here. Okay. It's fun, and you get to learn about all these different cultures. You work with so many different people. You hear their stories, you hear how they arrive, that you hear, their family lives. And it's such a humbling experience. I always remind myself at the end of the day that I'm like, I go downstairs, I sit at the table, and I'm just like, wow, like, I have so many amazing clients with so many different stories, with different backgrounds. And I'm just like, how did they get here? How do they survive all of the trauma, all of the issues that they're experiencing? I'm glad that they're here. I'm glad that they have somebody they can talk to. And it's so great. It's so great.
Yeah, that's amazing. Really rewarding work.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Now, for a social worker that's maybe like in the clinical field already and wanting to get to that clinical director position, what do you think is needed for them to kind of follow that path?
I definitely think a clinical director, well, I guess going in that route, you really need to be, a team player. Knowing what everybody's needs are, and being able to be there for support. How can you lift people up, provide support, listen, be a good listener? Part of being a clinical director is just listening. And some people are just wanting to vent. They want to vent their frustrations. They want to vent, what's going on with them. They have things that are going on in their personal lives. And sometimes they just need somebody to understand, like, hey, like this is impacting them at work as well. And so how can I, as a clinical director, support them? Because they're under my leadership and under my care. And so I want to make sure that they're okay, because it's my responsibility that they're doing okay, because they are serving, the public. And if something happens there, like that's my responsibility, right? And so having a person that can listen, provide support, has that initiative, I think, seeing what the needs are in agencies, and, hey, like I see that there's a need here. How can I, get in there and help? Because social workers are can be natural leaders. You know, they
Yeah.
see the need and they are there to advocate, and they are advocating for clients. They're advocating for, you know, policies to change. And so, but just getting in there and taking initiative. I think also one of the biggest thing is just having a servant's heart. I know
Mm,
I have a servant's heart, but also just having a good balance too, right? Like,
yeah.
you know, being a leader doesn't mean, you know, you rule with an iron fist and you hold a whip in your hand. And no, it's just
Hmm.
also, can you be firm, but also gentle? Can you, you know, have a really good balance? How can you be, setting limits and boundaries with your
Yeah.
clinicians, but also providing flexibility, right?
Hmm.
And I think every day I'm walking on, I imagine my life in this role as being on one of those like on the rope, and I'm feeling,
Yes.
and I'm like walking, and I'm like, you know, how can I, you know, stand in the middle? But sometimes I have to lean here and sometimes I have to lean there, and just keep going in a positive direction.
Hmm. That's a lot to balance, a lot to hold.
Yes, it is.
What do you do to make sure that you're taking care of yourself and you feel balanced in your life with all of these different responsibilities?
Oh, so something I started doing is just setting really clear boundaries and
Mm,
expectations with my interns. In my onboarding, I tell them very upfront, like after 6:30 or after 6 p.m., please do not call me unless it's an emergency.
good.
Um, if it's not an emergency, email me and I
Hmm.
will read it the next day and I'll respond to you. Now, if it's an emergency, your client is, you know, in the office, they're dying. Yes, call me.
Hmm.
I will be there. But if this is not an emergency and can wait till the next day, like we'll address it the next day.
Yeah.
And I think just having a really good separation from work and my life, my personal life is so important. So on weekends, I've been purposely leaving my phone like in the car.
That's so
So
important.
so that way, like I can disconnect, but also if I see like an emergency or a question, I can just quickly respond and just like answer the
Mhm.
question. Because I also don't want them to feel like they can't approach me, but I also like want to have a good work-life balance, especially after hours.
Right. Absolutely. It reminds me too of just, being a therapist, modeling those boundaries to clients, kind of doing the same thing with the interns and staff that you supervise. It's like, okay, you want them to know how to do boundaries, so you have to do it for yourself too.
Absolutely. Like I had a text message from a client yesterday and I read it, and part of me I think is just like either that like that anxiety of wanting to answer right away and just, you
Hmm.
know, just get it out of the way. But I was like, no, I'll respond to them tomorrow. This is not an emergency. And so I waited till the next day. I waited right at 8 a.m. Central Time. I waited right at 8 a.m. and I responded to her and I was like, hey, here's all the documents that you're needing. And here we go. And
Hmm.
I'm like, okay, cool. It waited. It
Yeah.
could wait. And then, you know, I like to just take some time for myself. Right now I'm watching a lot of Law and Order SVU,
Ooh.
just watching lots of it because I haven't seen it. And I was like, I'm just gonna dive into this. I saw too many Facebook reels. I guess I just need to just start watching it.
How they get you.
Oh yeah, I'm already on season 20 and I think it's like been a couple of months only and there's like 20 something seasons. And so
Hmm.
been watching a lot of Law and Order and just having my phone after hours, just putting it on do not disturb so that way it doesn't buzz throughout at night or like really late at night, and making sure that I'm making time for like my friends, my family, and my dog, you know, making time for myself as like going to an exercise, like taking
Hmm.
time off from work if like, you know, not all the time, but taking the time, you know, to take a
Yeah.
vacation, take a mental health break, making sure that, you know, I'm okay, because if I'm not okay, then my interns are going to need me. And then if I'm not okay for my interns, then my interns are not going to be successful. And
Hmm.
then also my other clinicians, if like I'm not okay, then my clinicians, if they need me and I can't help them, then they're not going to be successful as well.
Hmm. Absolutely. So important. Now, I mean, we really touched on a lot today, which is really exciting.
Yeah.
This is a tough question. I'm putting you on the spot again, but is there just like one piece of advice that you would give to social workers based on what we talked about today?
I think just know that, you know, you're never going to be, you're never going to know everything, and that's okay. I still feel like I may be in a clinical director position. I've been a clinician for 5+ years. I have 2 licenses in 2 states, and I still don't know everything. And I try to tell my interns and my clinicians, like, I don't know the answer to that question. But let's research it, because I'm not going to be here and pretending that I know the answer to something that I don't. And just always want to learn. Like, be curious, take the time to really specialize in what that's passionate for you. You know, if you really like working with trauma, like, how can you be, specialized in trauma and learn everything that you can about trauma so that you can be an expert in that field? Because, like, we need more clinicians. We need more BIPOC clinicians, and we need a lot of bilingual clinicians. And if people are out there considering what to do with their lives, like, look into social work. Like, it's so rewarding. You can do so much with it. We're almost a psychologist, just without the PhD and the ability to do a lot of testing, but we can still see clients. We can still do, medical social work. We can write policies and help lawmakers and help in foster care and help in CPS. We can do so many things. And then if you want to be a social worker and get out of social worker, you can be a realtor and use those skills to be a real estate agent.
Very
you can
true.
Use be a lawyer. You can be these skills to do nursing. There's just so much that social work teaches you that can be transferable skills in any career that you want to go into, if social work just ends up not being for you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's huge. This has been so great. I mean, I'm feeling like I learned a lot about the clinical director role, which is really exciting, and just everything else that we talked about today. Now, for those that are listening, can they continue to follow your journey somewhere?
Yeah. So I have my page is Happy Autumn Counseling. I named it after my dog, and so yeah, my dog Autumn, and my dog is an Australian Shepherd, and I named it after her because she's just so goofy and so smiley and just, always has such good energy. And that's how I aspire to be every day with my clients. And I think just the name is just appropriate just because that's my aspiration. Like, I aspire every single day to just be myself, smile and give my all to my clients every day, and just hope that, their life and everything just continues to progress.
Oh, that's so exciting. All right. And for those listening, I mean, all that will be linked below too. If anything resonated with you today, please feel free to like, comment, and share, and we will see you next time. Thank you, Diana.
Thank you.